It is my sincere hope that you are keeping safe and sound regardless of the COVID-19 circumstances the world is battling with. But we know that even when circumstances are there, people still manage to find something to smile about. As governments across the entire globe, including in the African continent today, forge responses, one undeniable fact is the impact this global pandemic has had on economies. Since the first cases were reported in the African continent, the impact on the economy continues to unfold. As of March 2020, a 1.4% decline in GDP equivalent to $29 billion has been reported. These losses which translate to lost jobs, these losses which translate to lost income and lost enterprise opportunities to the over 1.2 billion citizens in the African continent have far and wide-reaching effects in compounding a very precarious unemployment scenario where Africa already needs to create about 13 million jobs every year, especially for the youth who get into the labor market each and every year looking for jobs. The urgency, therefore, to buffer economies is at an all-time high. As actions are taken, one fact that stands out very clearly is that the story of African economies is incomplete without a deep dive into the informal sector and how it is coping. The informal sector accounts for over 80% of all employment in sub-Saharan Africa and constitute the chassis upon which our economic locomotive strives. These are the unsung heroes and heroines of Africa's growth. I've been so for quite a very long time. But the question we must then be able to answer today is that this informal sector that has been described as the present and future of the Africa of work in the continent today, we must ask ourselves, how can potential solutions be maximized for this informal sector? And we need to remember that these are small-scale groceries. The people we're talking about are retailers. The people we're talking about are small-scale traders in rural and urban areas. The people we're talking about are our youth, the manufacturers and young entrepreneurs stepping into the scene every day, getting up from morning and going to make sure that they can be able to put food on the table. These are the people who supply us with our household goods and services, who supply us with the food we consume on our tables. These are the critical group without whom we might not be able to come to where we are today. To them, technical jargon sometimes or big grammar that may resonate to those in the formal sector does not matter much to these people. To them, bank accounts or bank loans means very little. What worries them is how they will sell their next bunch of vegetables. What worries the people in the informal sector is how they'll be able to get the next person to buy from their kiosks. What worries them each and every day is how will they be able to get buyers for their harvest and from such daily trade afford to put a roof over their heads. What worries them is how can they be able to put food on the table? How can they be able to clothe their families, send their kids to school? How can they be able to ensure that they can afford a decent health care for their households? In this critical group lies an opportunity through which Africa's recovery from COVID-19 cannot ignore and must turn to be a source of many smiles for us all. But getting to this desirable end starts with appreciating and responding head-on to the realities we are confronting today. And let's face it, under COVID-19, this informal sector has been hard hit. At local groceries, you see shortages in critical consumer goods are becoming common feature. As we converse today, small retailers, the groceries, the open-air traders, the stall owners who trade under $150 daily, and who are the fabric of the informal sector across the continent, have been faced with closure. While this has been done as a precautionary public health way of making sure that these people should be healthy, which is quite very, very important to ensure that we arrest the spread of the coronavirus, it has grounded this group that drives economies. We must then ask ourselves, how can this informal sector group emerge stronger? How can we ensure that they can emerge from this unfortunate turn of events and out of their strong re-emergence drive a formidable resurgence of economies across the continent? And this is crucial. But what we must understand is that what we know today is that countries across the entire globe are framing policy responses to buffer the economies and populations against the repercussions of the COVID-19. In the process, the stimulus packages has arisen as long as among most formidable policy measures been adopted across the globe. Across the globe, countries are offering as high as 20% of the gross domestic product as emergency COVID-19 stimulus. It is no different in the continent today, and the continent needs an estimated no less than 100 billion US dollars. But what we need to understand is that this stimulus can actually be used as seed investments that accelerate and incentivize efforts towards unlocking the much needed globally competitive actions that can put people back to work, that can drive climate action. For example, if you take the Africa agro market today, we know that it's estimated to be worth up to about 150 billion US dollars each year in the next 5 years' time. While it is open to global competition, empowering the local informal sector to take lead in developing competitive local products, to take lead in ensuring that they can be able to compete for self-shell space, offer an opportunity for developmental strides in the continent. What we need to ask is, how can stimulus packages in the continent become the building blocks for such enterprises, as opposed to being the traditional short-term cash transfers? And this, we need to do 4 things. The first is, if you look at the informal sector, we need to prioritize buffering the informal sector so that they can have safety nets. And in the continent today, if you take an example of decentralizing solar dryers to farmers in local markets to be able to ensure that they can dehydrate and preserve their harvest that remains unsold at the end of the day, and they can be able to sell it where demand peaks, is not only going to cut post-harvest losses, but it's going to increase their earnings up to 30 times as the data is showing from the work that we do on the ground. And this is delivered innovatively by applying accessible climate action solar dryers, which enhance incomes by creating long-term small-scale manufacturing opportunities for our youth, especially to fabricate these solar dryers, who can then be able to not only benefit themselves, but can also ensure that they are driving actions that are also not piling on emissions that exacerbate climate change in the first place. Stimulus packages being discussed should therefore be aimed to buffer these players in the informal sector by targeting the structures that are used to conduct their trade. For example, if you take cooperatives, in every local community in the continent you have cooperatives. Cooperatives are grounded community financing structures for these players, and the stimulus could be targeted at cautioning cooperatives against liquidity crunches, hence ensure that delayed payments that may arise as a result of the slowdown do not render this informal sector insolvent and close them down. The second aspect, which is quite very, very important, is human capital. What I call skills retooling for the youth is very important. Youth skills must be improved, and their skills must be adapted regardless of disciplinary backgrounds for applications in establishing enterprises in what we call catalytic sectors, which Africa has in abundant sunshine, 365 days, 65% on cultivated riverland. All this provides opportunities across the entire global value chain that is worth 1 trillion US dollars. So the point is, stimulus packages should therefore go to create incentives in the form of tax breaks, in the form of reliefs, in the form of rebates to enterprising youth across the entire continent who are already engaged in these areas, to encourage them and to keep them afloat during these turbulent times. Inspiring these youth and ushering them to action through what we call innovative volunteerism continues to be even more important at this moment. We must inspire and motivate these youth so that they also know that they are leaders, and whatever thing they do, they should be contributing to the development transformational agenda for climate action in the continent. And the third point is that measures are being taken today to unlock liquidity opportunities in the informal sector. Even as we ride through the emergency response period, we cannot disregard the fact that the informal sector that is currently cash-strapped actually represents an over 300 billion worth credit market. But this remains untapped because formal credit institutions sometimes remain reluctant to invest in measuring the credit worthiness of informal sector players. Over 95% of their transactions are still in cash, and this is among reasons that locks them out of the contemporary credit structures. However, modern technologies such as blockchain with immutability and transparency offer a way out to evaluate transactions in the informal sector. So it is quite very, very important that the continent should take lead in formalizing such blockchain technology. And this can start by establishing ground rules for blockchain governance, for example, being a nascent area safeguarding local innovators who go into developing solutions. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, as COVID-19 rages Let us remember that as sad as this has been, it will come and go, and that future emergencies will still arise. Climate change will continue to overwhelm systems, as we saw with the two major hurricanes, Hurricane Idai and Kenneth, as we've seen with droughts and locust attacks that have all hit Africa in a span of less than a year. Let us therefore brace ourselves for long-term resilience. Let us be courageous and not allow anything to overwhelm us. And let us foster the courage of Mother Teresa, an icon of resilience in crisis, who quipped, "I alone cannot change the world. I alone cannot change the world. But what I can do as an individual is to cast a stone across waters to create many ripples." Let us selflessly resolve to cause ripples in the ocean of solutions. And that will start with us leveraging on what we can do, giving our time, consoling one another, inspiring one another, because we know that we can be stronger together, and ensuring that if we leverage on the stimulus packages as long-term investments to catalyze competitive climate action enterprises amongst Africa's informal sector, which is the fabric of our economies, we can foster a long-term resilience approach to the continent and ensure that our youth not only get lifted from the bottom of the pyramid, but create opportunities for themselves and build a resilient continent. Let's stay stronger together.